here at the Dallas Planning.
Not tonight, anyway.
All right, well, without further ado, I believe we have a quorum. We'll do a roll call in a moment. I'm going to order the City of Dallas Planning Commission on Tuesday, January the 10th, 2023. Correction on the agenda there. It says 22. Got to start with that.
Like my checkbook.
It was probably 2022 when they wrote the agenda.
Right.
Oh, the next.
Sure it was. We're going to call the meeting to order and we'll have the roll call
John Swanson,
here.
Andy Grow,
Here.
Tori Banford,
Here.
Carol Kowash,
Here.
Rich Spofford,
Here.
and John Schulte is excused.
Thank you. We have a quorum, so we'll proceed to item number 2, or item number 3, which is the election of planning commission officers. So how do we conduct this?
I move to nominate you
I second.
as the chair.
As the chair. So there's been a nomination and a second to nominate John Swanson as the chair or president of the Dallas Planning Commission.
Do we have to have a vice chair?
Yes.
I don't nominate me.
Well, let's move on to the first. Let's go through the first item first. So is there any discussion on the nomination? If not, let's vote. I think we don't need a roll call vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion
Okay, you
carries.
can fix your name tag now.
I'm the new
Yeah, you can
president.
just slide that in now.
Yes.
I'll be the official slide.
But we do need to elect a vice president, so I will entertain nominations.
I nominate Andy Grove.
Oh.
Second.
I really don't want to be the vice chair because I don't want to have to,
It's not an approval criteria.
No,
and then I nominate.
You don't know my name?
Good times for lack of a second.
We have a second on either of those nominations.
She already
I
seconded for Andy.
seconded for Andy.
Oh, you beast.
Vice President. Andy will work on it. I think it'd be just fine if I have to miss a meeting, so. And our planning commission meetings are not the same night as these. so-
Are you saying I'm gonna get it and not him?
No one even seconded mine.
There hasn't been a vote. Nobody seconded you.
I don't know if that's. how it
Oh,
works,
it's
but-
gonna be bad.
Okay, okay, that's how we're gonna play it.
So Andy Roll has been nominated and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Present.
Just like-
I learned about that this week.
Myself as the new president, all kidding aside, myself as the new president, Andy as vice president. Yeah, for 2023, congratulations. John's not here, but I appreciate everybody's service. It's not easy to come down here tonight
It's
and
okay.
volunteer for your local community, and I appreciate it very much. I
You
know
can do it.
I've been on both sides of the table, and staff, I've been planning commissioner, and now I'm staff again. I've been on the side of the property owner, so it's very interesting work. So I really appreciate all the work you folks do for us here. And it's very important work. We need to remember that, even though it's a lighthearted meeting tonight. There will come a day this year, I'm sure, when we're all going to be sitting here, biting our fingernails over how we're going to handle something. So looking forward to those good times. I'm looking forward to working with all you folks for the rest of the year. So item number 4 on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the special meeting that we done on November the 28th. I did not attend, but I have read the minutes. So do we have a motion or any comments on the minutes from November 28th?
Move to approve as written.
Second.
Yeah, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Okay.
You-
Approved as written. Thank you. Number 5 is the opportunity for public comment. It's an opportunity for anyone that is here to speak on items that are not on the agenda. I don't see many members of the public. I see other city staff here and commissioners, but if anyone would like to make any public comments that aren't part of the agenda, now's your chance.
Anybody online, Ben?
Nobody online.
Thank you. Glad to ask that. I appreciate that. And then item number 6, which is our item of business for this evening, which is a report on our status as a rent burden community. I'll hand it over to staff.
If we can, before it changes. Yeah, that's all right, that's all right. Just for the record, and this should be reflected in the minutes, this is actually the 2022 meeting. State law requires annually that there be a meeting that is devoted, or at least in part, to consideration and discussion of a report on rent burden status as a rent burdened community. We did schedule this for discussion at the December Planning Commission meeting. Unfortunately, there was not a quorum at that meeting, so being so late in the year, it was carried over till tonight. But this is the 2022 report.
Thank you, Lane. And I'll not necessarily have to be on record, but I was part of the problem that we didn't have a quorum in December. So thank you very much, and I'm sure that it'll be just fine, and I appreciate the clarification. And we will have a report on this in 2023.
Yes.
Well,
So,
assuming that we are still a rent and burden community. in
That is correct.
2023.
Not all communities are
We
required.
won't know that until February.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, we probably,
Well, yeah.
So we'll hand it over to staff for a presentation on our status as a refuge.
So I do not actually have a prepared presentation on this. It's
Okay.
not like a public hearing like we've done in the past. It's just the requirement under state law is that we have a discussion at a public meeting addressing the causes and consequences of severe rent burdens within the city, the barriers to reducing rent burdens, and the possible solutions to reduce the rent burden households in the city. That's just kind of copied straight out of the OARs. The definition of the severe rent burden city, as you can see in the staff report, is where at least 25% or more of the renter households spend 50% or more of their household income on rent. And so we've kind of been bouncing around on this metric a little bit. Some years we're over it, some years we're under it. So for 2022, we were over 25% of our population being severely rent burdened. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So I have a question. You know, the last time we were severely burdened, we went through a process of having a committee and doing housing needs analysis and all that. I wonder if we're looking at maybe considering some solutions this time or sometime this year, if we think we will be next time, so that we have something to actually implement. Thoughts?
Yeah, so to the extent that the legislation that requires this was enacted around the same time that we were doing our HNA, that did coincide
So
very,
we
very neatly.
incorporated.
And so we were able to capture some of that. Sort of moving on to the next steps of solutions, I think has been really challenging. Kind of the outcome that I recall of some of the previous conversations that we've had on this has been that a lot of the barriers are kind of like beyond the city's control, a lot of
Absolutely.
like macroeconomic kind of issues.
Absolutely.
So if you have ideas as to, things that the city could be doing to help alleviate this, certainly, all
Okay.
ears on that, but.
speaking of, if I may, state law and its role in this, I did hear actually from the city manager today, well, I'd heard about this in development. There will be a bill in this session probably to allow house sharing.
Like they do in Portland.
Yeah, well, yeah, where you have, you can bring people in and let them stay in a room in your home.
Mhm.
And designed in such a way as to avoid, well, basically it will preempt city regulations that would prohibit that kind of, use. And that's designed very much to address housing affordability, to encourage people to open rooms in their homes, to bring in
Right.
tenants. We'll see how that develops, but that at least is one strategy that probably, I think, will come from the legislature.
Okay,
Is that not allowed currently specifically in the city code?
Well, no, not a city code. I'm trying to think, you've got limitations on, in our definition of family and in,
A single family?
yeah, in terms of, what is it, 5 or more persons related by blood? I can't remember what the, how that definition, or marriage, or, you know, there's a familial status there. It would expand what's allowed in the city right now.
And avoiding the, the boarding house type label, and I'm sure that that's,
that's, I'm
the
sure.
reason
part of
that,
it,
that,
yeah.
that it's there,
Yep.
so.
Mhm.
Well, and there's some kind of database that the Portland area has where they match up people.
Is that right? No, no.
I don't know how, if they plan to do anything at the state level, if it's back to taxes, I haven't heard, but,
Just out of the box.
okay. Thank you.
I can say that I know that there is, at state government level, there's an initiative, there are new initiatives that are gonna be in place to address the residential housing needs that are all over, whether they be in metro urban areas or whether they be in smaller places, towns like Dallas, but I know that there is gonna be some focus on that at the state level, and it may be more of a county question than a city of Dallas question, but I'm wondering if there are any affordable housing initiatives or projects that are on the horizon, and I don't know, and I'm not.
It's part of the-
trying to put staff on the spot, but I'm just wondering if there are any, hypothetically, if there are any affordable housing, mid-market housing, workforce housing initiatives that are going on in our area that might alleviate this problem.
Mhm.
So I'm not aware of anything specific at the city level on that sort of issue. We do have some, regional partners that we work with, Polk CDC, the Polk Housing Authority. Polk CDC actually has a project right now where they're building 10 new apartments
Okay.
over off of Pine Street. So they've got some additional, they've got some units all that they're already, they're now expanding onto the adjacent land, so they have a bit of a complex that they're developing. I don't believe they have final certificate of occupancy on that yet, but they have made, as I understand, some pretty significant progress on constructing that.
And
And
in the
that's a
next-
special needs, right? Veterans.
Veterans, I think, yeah, I'm not sure if it's all veterans, but at least a substantial part.
Okay.
There's also, in discussion within the next couple of years, a development, across from. It's, Tim's Auto, that shop there on Washington Street on the corner, vacant lot,
Oh, okay. yeah.
next to the old dog. Well, I guess it is still a dog groomer or whatever it is.
Mhm.
A mixed use, this is also by Polk CDC, ground floor, commercial, and then I think 4 floors of apartment above.
I haven't kept track, but there was one that the housing authority did in Independence that's considered Polk County.
Hmm.
Is it open yet? Have we heard, or I don't remember where that is in the process, but it's a bigger complex that has affordable housing. The
Right.
other thing I noticed on the governor's agenda and on her top 4 items she wants to work on is affordable housing is number 1, as it should be. And she's talking about some pretty big statistics as far as how much she wants to put on the ground. I suspect that we will have opportunities there for wanting to get into that. I don't mean the city per se, but our housing partners. So that's coming too.
Right, and I mean, there's always discussion of different projects that, sometimes don't always come to fruition. I know Polk
Right.
CDC was looking at a project at Uglow and Ellendale, and they had some
Yeah.
really nice architectural renderings of what that would be. It'd be
Mhm,
kind of different than the apartments that we've kind of had thus far, so
mhm.
kind of a different market demographic, but
Didn't get
These-
state funding,
these things are all subject to state.
That's
But
a
no,
little
they-
tricky.
but they could come back. They could come
Yeah.
back, yeah.
Right.
Well, they you know, they have an annual competitive cycle.
Right.
And actually twice a year now, I think it is, so.
And, you know, there's always, you know, activity on the private side as well that maybe not, isn't regulated affordable, but is, you know, the potential to be less expensive. There's a former retirement home at 511 East Ellendale that is in the process of being renovated into apartments.
Nice.
And so to the extent that they're taking an existing building and converting it, I would think that would be maybe less expensive. And we're certainly trying to be flexible in how we do some of the permitting on that to try and minimize the upfront expense for them.
Well, in my experience, rehab is always like around 60 to 80% of any other, and sometimes a lot cheaper depending on how much rehab they do.
Mhm.
So that's always a good option if converting.
Right. The big issue that we're having with that one is actually parking. Because retirement facilities have a lot less parking than
Right.
apartments do, and so they don't want to be paving up front. So we're trying to be creative and, you know, can they maybe do that sometime down the road? You know, what kind of flexibility can there be in the code to make this happen sooner rather than later so we can
So
get
it's
some
nice.
housing on the ground. So certainly we do what we can to work around the regulatory barriers as they present themselves, but
And let's also remind ourselves that what we're talking about is rent burden. It's not necessarily low income or section.
It
8
doesn't
or
have to be,
affordable. It
no.
doesn't have to be that.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough to find residential rental places in a smaller and medium sized city. When I first moved here, I was not underemployed, but I had a difficult time finding a place to rent until I was able to afford my own home. So I understand. And I also would add, and I want to make sure that we make this point, is that if I'm not mistaken, in the last year, we've considered a couple of high density housing projects. So I think we're tilting in the right direction, but I think there's still some work to be done, and acknowledging the fact that we are rent burden is something that's important, and hopefully, and I can reach out. I'm friendly with Brent DeMo. I could ask him what's going on at the county, and I think that we can move in that direction. And like I said, it's tough nut to crack, because even at market rate, there's not a lot of residential opportunities in
Well,
our
and
city.
the other thing that's really hard here is we don't have as much population, but we're gonna double in size in the next 5 to 10 years, and we're pricing like Salem all the time. Almost all of the rentals are higher.
yeah, I know, when I was looking for an apartment here in town, I was on a waiting list for what, 6-9 months
Yeah.
to,
Yeah,
and I think
And
the
that-
only reason I was actually able to was because the eviction moratorium expired and they kicked a whole bunch of people
Mhm.
out, so. Not good
And
for
so
them,
that's
benefit
maybe
for
not
me,
the best,
but
Right.
yeah,
It helped you in that circumstance,
Yeah.
definitely.
Well, yeah, anecdotally speaking, I mean, this is 15 years ago, to be able to rent a house, a standalone, single family home. I moved to Independence while I worked at the city of Dallas,
Yes.
and moved back to Dallas when I was able to buy my own. So
Yes.
this has been a long-standing problem, and it's not unique to Dallas, but it's something that we need to keep on our radar screen. So we'll bear this in mind when the challenges of high-density housing and apartment buildings are proposed, and folks that don't like the vacant field across their street
Mhm.
where they watch deer and turkeys every day are supposed to be considered when we need to consider the needs of the folks that live here and the folks that work here. So
That's absolutely true. And if we're gonna keep people, working in Dallas and able to live in Dallas,
that's it.
it's really important.
well, and especially as we look at, you know, kind of the housing mix that we've been building, like in the last 10 years, we've built thousands of single family homes.
Yes.
We've built a grand total of, I think, like 32 apartment units that are like not rent controlled, not senior housing, just like
Well,
market apartments.
Our housing provider is not doing bigger complexes right now. They're only doing special needs. And so the only option we have is
Mhm.
Polk County. We
Right.
don't have a local housing person at this
Mhm.
point that's doing other than special needs. And that's totally needed. But it doesn't serve the
There's
rest of the
more.
population. Yeah, it's needed more probably, you're right.
Speaking of that, I'm unfamiliar with who in the area does that. I know it was number 5 on the colored handout. It says some people must be invited to the public meeting. I was wondering who, if any, were invited, and obviously nobody showed up, but did we invite specific people, and who would those be?
So we sent out the notice to actually something of a list. It was obviously the Polk Housing Authority, the Polk CDC.
What does CDC stand for?
Community Development Corporation.
Thank you.
It's a
Yes.
type of nonprofit.
Got it.
We sent out notice to Polk County because, you know, they have the affordable housing kind of programs there. Brent Demo, for example, being, you know, kind of the contact person. There's some nonprofits in kind of the Salem area that cover Marion and Polk counties. So we reached out to them as well. So there was something of a list, but it was not a huge long list. There's maybe 6 or 8 names on it, I think, in total, which is the way the legislation was originally written. We were supposed to send notice to people experiencing rent burden.
Yeah, I saw that.
How do you do that? So the guidance that's come down is send it to the nonprofits and the governments, and they know who their clientele is, so they'll make it happen. But
Are we concerned that nobody showed up, and or what would their participation in this meeting include?
so it's an open conversation, so they have the opportunity to come and speak on these issues. And if you recall from the years previous, you know, we had an invited special guest, either from DLCD
Oh,
or
yeah, I remember. that.
whoever, to come and speak on kind of what they're doing on their side. Didn't do that this time around, but
These
certainly.
have never attracted public.
Right, and that it's never really had a very big attendance. The biggest attendance we had was the first year that we did it, because we were also doing it in conjunction with the HNA.
Right.
So we had a built-in, you know, stakeholder group that was already engaged with what was going on here in Dallas. So it does not surprise me that, you know, in the absence of that, we're not really getting, you know, a
Okay.
huge room full of people. And I think most cities would also have basically an empty room. So
Okay.
And just a point of clarification, you know, Dallas is not just rent burdened. So rent burdened means that rent burden generally means 60% or less of the area median income for that city or county. It's done by county. And severely means that they're doing more than 50% of their income, and they generally are 50% or lower of area median income. And Dallas has a significant population that's at 30%. So that means they're 30% of everyone else median of their median income. And that's calculated by HUD at the national level. And then each county has its own chart that says where their rent burdening is, and actually that's available in housing and community services. So it's not a little thing to be severely rent burdened. It's pretty significant.
Do we know how many communities in the state are designated this as a percentage?
I do not.
you know, there was some discussion of that a while back, and I forget now what the number was.
Okay.
It's
I remember when
more
we
than
did
a
the housing needs
handful, but-
analysis, it
but
was,
less than
there
half.
were quite a few communities on that list, so, okay.
But there's several hundred cities in Oregon. so-
Okay, just curious, what it says, income of the household on gross rent, is gross rent just whatever you're charged for rent? Or I just want to make sure I understand that term.
Which one are you looking at?
It's in number 1 under severe rent burden.
Okay,
It says if the household spends more than 50% of the income of the household on gross rent. What's gross rent?
It's rent less utilities. So.
Okay, oh, less utilities, so, okay.
Yes, so,
So it doesn't include utilities, so they could be spending even more.
Yes.
They are spending even more.
they are.
So that's just whatever, like $13.50 a month or whatever for,
Uh-huh,
to be able to sit in the house. And then
yes.
all those other things that you have to do to be there aren't even included in that. So that makes
So
it even worse.
Makes it even worse.
Yeah, and with housing prices getting as ridiculous as they have in the last year or so. And now they're getting better, but mortgage rates are, doubling or more. It's gonna get even more expensive for somebody to own a house and then rent it.
The big challenge for a lot of people that are lower income is they can't income qualify for the house that is the right size for them.
Right.
So they're buying something that's substandard for what they need because that's all they can afford if they can even income qualify. So that's the real challenge.
Scary situation.
It's tough. It's tough. All I would say is that it's not unique to Dallas.
No.
It's a statewide problem. It's for better or for worse, it is being acknowledged and addressed at higher levels of government than ourselves. So I would just, first of all, I've said, are there any other commissioners that would like to have a comment or have anything to say on the issue? I was just,
Sorry.
no, that's okay. That's okay. You have knowledge in this area, Carol. So I appreciate that. I would just say that we remind ourselves down the road later this year. We consider redevelopment or new development that will support rent, residential lifestyle option, that we keep this in mind and understand that it is a need in Dallas and it's something that needs to be addressed. No one wants to see anyone overpaying for their residence, whether they rent or they own. But at the same time, sometimes we have folks that want to come out and, have an objection to something new or big going in their neighborhood. So let's all bear that in mind as we go along and we see some of these new rental options come online, because I think there is going to be some financial incentive to create more and better affordable, whether that means by definition affordable housing or just rental options for the local residents. We don't want to chase these folks away, and we don't want anyone to feel unwelcome in our community. So it's important that we had this discussion. And anybody have anything else to add?
The last thing I want to say is your comment reminded me of the last major development that we reviewed. They greatly reduced the number they were apartments they were going to build in this particular phase. They're saying, oh, we're going to build a whole bunch more next time. I think if I'd been thinking of this at the time, I'd have at least challenged them of the fact that we really need apartments in this area, and Chase's statistic made it even more come to home that yeah, that's fine, but the reason these requirements are there is because we're trying to provide for the community, and you're wanting to develop something. There's the side that, yeah, this is what you want to develop, but the city also needs that. And because this is a public service in a way, we need you to be thinking about being responsible for this, because they could leave that next phase for who knows how long, and we will have missed the opportunity to have more apartments available right now. So that's something I'm going to bring up, like you said, as we deal with these situations. I want to make sure people are challenged on this and aware of this.
I think we all agree that there's a high level of community need in this area. So, and like I said, even the income able rental residential community have a hard time, let alone folks that are income challenged. So
Yes.
We'll just bear that in mind as we go forward in our new year. So
Thank you for bearing with me. I had to say something.
no, not at all. I appreciate it.
I appreciate everything you said.
Absolutely, absolutely. And coming from the economic development side, in what I've done professionally, you talk about trying to recruit a business or an industry into a community. The first thing they ask is like, well, what's the availability of residential options for the folks that we intend? Well, you want to talk about creating jobs, where are those folks going to live?
Yeah.
And it's an important issue. I don't have the answers. But like I said, let's just bear this in mind as we go forward in the things that we consider and make thoughtful decisions that hopefully reduce some of these barriers. So
Charlie had his hand up.
I'm sorry.
Okay, set up 3 points for your consideration. real quick. One is that if the commission is interested, we could schedule a work session at some point in the future and invite representatives from the CDC and or the housing authority to come in and update you on what they.
I would love that.
I think that would be fantastic.
Sure.
Secondly, we are in the process of working with a consultant to revise the Lock Rail Node master plan. And a big part of that is in response to both the HNA and the EOA to increase the number of acres of higher density residential as well as commercial and lower the threshold for, the demand on the single family residential, which there was a lot of that originally. That area, as you probably know, is largely undeveloped. So that's something else that we're working on in part to try to increase the availability of higher density residential, which, has a corollary relationship to putting more units on the market to ideally lower the rent burden. And lastly, I still did there's 25 of these in Oregon 2022 that were in the severely rent burden category.
How many more in the regular rent burden?
I didn't count that, but it looked like about the same.
Same month,
Probably about
okay.
50 on the list.
Okay. Thanks. That was very thoughtful. Appreciate
Out
it.
of about 250 cities in the state.
Right, but this is only looking at those over 10,000.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's a good
Yeah,
point.
so
Yeah, that's
much
true.
Smaller number.
That's true. Yeah, the end,
Sure.
the end is small. Yeah.
Yeah,
Most cities in North Carolina. Under.
Yeah, that's right.
See, we do have local professional expertise here to inform us on that. Thank you. And I think it'd be a great idea if we can coordinate for maybe an agenda in the future. When we don't have a heavy burden of public hearings or anything like that, that would be fantastic. And I think it'd be a really productive discussion. Bring us right back here. Sorry.
I was just gonna add along that same topic as we get probably public hearings in the future where maybe properties designated higher density, mixed use, multifamily, that we think about this, because to that point, the more variety of units that are available make that price a little bit more flexible so that, when we get these applications coming in, remembering that we have this issue as we consider it.
Thank you. Any other comments on our status as an extremely rent burdened community? Knowledge is half the battle. So going forward, let's just bear this in mind as we make thoughtful decisions about developments or redevelopments that are proposed before us. Excellent. So we'll move on in our agenda this evening to item number 7, which is planning commissioner comments. Are there any planning commissioners here this evening that would like to speak on any subject that to kick us off on a new year and get ready for what might be coming down the road? I have one question, but I'll let everyone else. If anyone else has any comments or questions? No? So I'll ask a question as staff. Is there anything on the horizon that you can pique our interest in future planning commission items that might come before us? Is there anything going on that you can comment on? And I understand if you can't, because I've been in your seat, Chase, and I understand exactly. I see your smile. I know what you're thinking as I ask the question. But what can you tell us about what we can look forward to in 2023?
So the only application that I have on my desk currently that is eventually going to make its way to you is a subdivision that has some challenges. So
Okay.
we're working through that and hopefully we'll be able to wrap that up in a nice tight little bow for you. But
Okay. Okay. What about the status of our new urban renewal district? Is there anything to report on that?
So, it was officially formed in September of last year. It's going to take a while for it to generate the increment that it needs to first, effectively do anything with the resident side.
Mhm.
Related to that, though, is there's the TGM projects or the mill site that should be getting underway at some point this year. It's way behind, but it's out of our control because it's an outlet project and they're doing their thing. So we're just
Right.
They picked a consultant, so that part's done, but they're still messing around with the legal stuff, contracting, et cetera. So we'll know when we know, but that project is scheduled to essentially run the duration of this year along with the Montreal project. And we'll also mention this, since I have the floor for a second, we are still in the process of acquiring the former Bank of America building here downtown. And there will be lots of opportunity for public engagement on that as we sort of go through a visioning exercise to decide what the community would like to see there. The general framework, though, that we're working from is a multi-story mixed-use project on that site. Not too dissimilar from what you've seen recently in Monmouth, and it's in there. So we would hope to.
So we are, sorry,
Pardon my ignorance, but you mentioned TGM for the old mill site. I don't know what that
Sorry.
is.
Transportation Growth Management, it's a grant program that's jointly managed by ODA and DOCD.
That's right. We talked about it. I just wasn't, I don't have that,
Sorry about that.
and yeah, that thing in my brain
Thanks for
yet.
asking. So it's designed to do some master planning around when you have kind of complex projects that involve elements of both land use and transportation, sort of overcome that. And so the mill site's a good candidate for that. And we're trying to kind of, one of the council's actually top goal, city council's top goal is to prepare the mill site for redevelopment. And so this is one of the steps along with the regional district to get us to that point.
Thank you.
Well, as any of those projects, the downtown projects or the mill site project come close to a tipping point, anytime you can offer a report to us, we'd be glad to hear it, because I can say, you know, from where I sit, and I'm sure the other commissioners feel the same way, is that our friends and family and neighbors are asking us what's going on in Dallas. You're on the planning commission. So the more we know, the more we can spread the word that positive things are under development. So I appreciate you being here and giving us that information on all these issues. So.
and we are still working on the local wetland inventory, hoping to bring that to you in the not too distant future, now that we've got some additional staff capacity to get some of that stuff processed. And we are working on some development code updates. So we'll be having some public hearings on that at some point in the not too distant future as well. So things to look
There
forward
was
to.
stuff going on. I just had-
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's always stuff going on.
We'll bubble to the top first.
That's
Yes,
it.
that is always the
That's
question,
it.
yes.
That's it. So are there any other planning commissioner comments this evening? Okay, are there any staff comments for us this evening?
So one of the things that planning commission has asked for in the past has been some commissioner training. So I know that there is going to be a training session that DLCD and the OAPA are going to be running in Corvallis. I believe they've moved the date on that now to sometime in March. So I'll give you guys some updates as to once they've finally nailed down what the date's going to be. If you guys want to maybe do that.
Field trip to Corvallis. That'd be fun. That'd be fun. I'm very friendly with the seated planner at Corvallis. I'm sure that you'd be involved in that, so.
So I'll keep you posted.
Anything else from staff?
I neglected to mention, this is going to be also the year that we get ever closer, maybe completed with the formation of our National Historic District downtown. You'll appreciate, John. And so in the future, we might have some of those fun conversations here.
It's not till 11:30 at night.
Hopefully, If I can help.
Right, if any of us can.
Yes.
Let's knock the buildings down first before we create the. historic-
single family, third in the story.
Also, in addition to the training that Chase mentioned, we're going to be doing a better job of doing sort of the required refresher training with all of our boards and commissions. Hopefully the first quarter of this year, that it only takes like 15 or 20 minutes. We kind of go through the policies and procedures manual and just remind each committee commission or what their charge is.
And process. and-
Yeah, we kind of want to wait till we get all the seats filled. We do have some vacancies, so.
And we are currently advertising for that, as I
Yeah, we have a
recall.
vacancy here.
One vacancy.
So once we get those, all the seats filled, we'll probably do that at one of your meetings, just for people.
Excellent. We have our engineering department represented. Tom, do you have anything to add to the conversation?
No. No, this is,
Phineas, you
you'll
good?
be seeing me at these now, so if anyone in public works represents. We come into all the planning commission meetings.
Excellent.
All right.
You're very welcome. It's nice to see you.
Okay.
Okay, well, that concludes our agenda for this evening, unless anyone in the room is after the good of the order, I will adjourn the meeting.
I wish you at least a very long and consistent ability to attend all the meetings. And speaking of training, I wanna have written down all those things that are supposed to be read when we do these things. So that I don't have to try and do them from memory.
You got a script.